Alrighty, I'm back with another card review for Secrets of Power. Got 3 more leaders, so it looks like the new trend this spoiler season is 3 leaders a week instead of 2. So a lot more to talk about with that. A bunch of new cards as well, so I'm gonna dive right in. Before I get going, please hit that subscribe button, and if you're interested in some more content from me, do check out my Patreon as well. And let's get to it. So just like last time, I start with the leaders. I think it gives a good overview of what the biggest potential players might be for the week's previews, and a lot of preview cards are often tied into those leaders, so that's why I start there. And then I'm going to go color by color through the cards, focusing a little more on some cards that I think are higher value, and then bundling some of the more draft specific cards or cards that just don't have that much of a power ceiling. So we are going to start with the leaders, and the first one is Luthen Rail, and this is a new aggression heroism leader. He's pretty cool. He's a 2/7 on 5, so he's got the health to support that 5 flip. 2 power is a little lacking. Most of the 2 power 5 flip leaders haven't really been able to push into competitive play. I think Krennic, especially early before more cards came out, was definitely the one that was doing it the best. He also had a way to kind of self-buff himself whenever he took damage. He became a 3 power leader, but let's just say 7 means you are pretty safe to flip and you are going to be around to use your ability. So now let's see what he does. On the leader side, he says when a friendly unit is defeated while attacking, key here, while attacking, so not if it gets attacked. You may exhaust this leader if you do deal 1 damage to a unit or base. That is a pretty powerful free ability. It's just kind of situational, right? The goal here would be to be able to kind of trade up with your units. So, my 3/3 attacks your 4/4, well, they actually just trade, right? All my units kind of explode for an extra damage. And even if you don't have anywhere to put that damage, that damage can go to a base, or it can even go into another unit. So it doesn't have to go into the unit that this is attacking. And that opens up a lot of play here. I would caution anyone looking at this and thinking this is an aggro leader to kind of reassess. I don't think this is an aggro leader at all. I know that the damage that this can do with your units dying can go to base, and maybe the way this could be an aggressive build is if we really go incredibly wide with a token style spam build, and then kind of all your tokens just kind of attack into things and blow up and cause incidental damage. But they still have to be defeated while attacking, which means they are attacking a unit, and that is not a particularly aggressive thing to be doing. Aggro decks like attacking base, so there's a little non-synergy there with aggro. I think this is more being tailored towards a board-centric control style unit deck. Think something like a mid-range Cad Bane deck, not like the 1-drop Cad Bane style aggro decks, but the ones that are aiming to use Cad Bane's ability to kind of incidentally make all their units trade up. And that's a lot of what this is trying to do. Now, this is a little more situational just because your opponent has this agency to be able to initiate the trades first, and your units don't explode for extra damage when they're the ones getting attacked. And that is certainly a bit of a downside. Another reason I don't see this as an aggro leader is because he's a 2/7 on 5. That is just not an aggressive stat line. You are not going to be able to race other aggro decks with this kind of leader. So let's see what he does on the other side, though. And he has the same line of text, except that it's repeatable now, and it says you may deal 2 damage to a unit or base, and that is pretty significant. So once he's out there, your units, whenever they attack and die, they're daring raiding whatever you want. The base, another unit, the unit they attacked, and that's pretty powerful. This will include when he attacks and dies himself. So that last hurrah that he does is kind of like a 4 damage attack, which is kind of cool. If you're able to get a few units into play, and I do think the kind of deck this wants to work with is a go wide, board-centric, unit control-y style deck, you can theoretically wipe the board on his flip turn. If a couple units you have can attack and die, that's a ton of damage. I think the package overall is a little clunky, but also interesting to kind of think about and potentially build around. Not sure it'll make waves just because of how, it's pretty limited, right? It's only when you're attacking, and you really need this ability to go off multiple times in a game, especially on his flip, to get a lot of value out of it. But this is one I'm at least interested to kind of pursue and see what we can come up with. All right, next is Colonel Yularen, and he is a villain command leader, and he is also a 5 flip, and he is a 4/6. So this stat line has always been kind of like the 4 power stat line has always been a very important thing to look out for when you are playing a villain deck that can play Overwhelming Barrage. And I believe that this is the first time we have a 4 power 5 flip leader in villain green. You've usually had to play other leaders and then play green as your base to get that combination. And Yularen just free rolls it. He can flip Barrage for 6, which has always been a very important break point. So that's, before we even talk about anything that he does ability wise, that's solid. It's a solid stat line. The 3/7 stat line is still kind of the hallmark best stat line for the 5 flip leaders, and we don't see 4/7 anymore. That happened exactly one time in set 1 with Boba, but 4/6 is also very solid. Now it's not going to hard carry this leader, so whatever he does, it's going to need to be good, and let's see. So he's an Imperial official, so he's got a couple relevant traits, especially official in this set, because it looks like we're getting a lot of official build around. And he is kind of like Leia from set 1. So he's got an action to exhaust, and then you attack with a unit, and then you may attack with another unit that costs less than it. So it's a different style restriction here. Leia, of course, was a tribal restriction. This has no restriction other than the cost, so theoretically should be easier to pull off and require much less of a specific build around. You can just play good units in your deck, and if you're curving, you should be able to use this ability, right? It's not an ability you can usually get much relevance out of until about turn 3, right? You play a guy on turn 1, you play a guy on turn 2, then maybe turn 3 you can attack with both of them at once. Of course, if you are playing 2 units during any of these turns, you might be able to do it. Just remember, you play 2 1-drops on turn 1, you still can't use this ability because they cost the same. On the flip, its ability becomes a when this unit completes an attack, you may attack with another unit that costs 4 or less, so it has to be less expensive than Yularen. And of course, he has to complete the attack, and in italics you see there, and survives, right? So that's what completing attack means. If he attacks into something and dies, you do not get the ability. So this is a pretty generic leader. There's not a ton of like specific build around here. You're just going to need, units of varying costs, and that happens in basically every deck. Now, because he is an official himself, and we're seeing some of the official synergy in this set to include, cards that potentially will buff other officials, cards that benefit from other units attacking first, like the 2-trop Partagast, the 0/6 that gets bigger whenever officials attack. Maybe there's some officials with plot as well. So there could be an angle here where there is a tribal deck, but it doesn't have to be. And I think the power floor here is actually pretty high. This isn't going to be bad by any stretch, just because, it's a 5 flip command leader with a 4/6 stat line with like a sort of decent ability. And there's only so bad this can be. Can this be top tier? Potentially. We still haven't really seen these kind of go wide decks flourish too often without very specific niche synergies. So space 1-drop aggro decks have kind of filled a role where like going wide early can work. Cad Bane has at times been able to do that, but usually it's hasn't really fit into like the specific like mid-rangey villain package. And I don't know if it will here, and this might just be more of a mid-range deck that uses this ability to kind of just action cheat sometimes, maybe create more effective trades. And of course, you've got this barrage synergy built into it. But I'm interested to see what more we get with officials specifically, because there are some decent ones. And even if it's only a splash synergy in this deck and you still just play it with just good rate units up and down the curve, then we can get a little more out of this besides just the generic unit stats and unit ability. And the last new leader here is C3PO, and he's a Cunning heroism, and he's a 4-flip. Now, he's a 1/6, which is, that is not a good stat line, honestly, for a 4-flip leader especially, because these sort of leaders almost always have to be aggro-focused. Now, there is Babu Frick, so let's not say the stat line is completely irrelevant. If we want to make a droid Babu Frick aggro deck, maybe there's some play there. Although, if your whole deck doesn't work, if Babu Frick is not in your hand or gets removed immediately, then you probably can't play that deck. But it's interesting, and maybe there will be other synergies, specifically with such a high health, low attack unit. The rest of the package here is a leader action that says pay 1 and exhaust. If you control an exhausted unit. This is not a good ability, unfortunately. The issue primarily here is you can never use this as your first action in a turn because you need another exhausted unit to even enable this. And then it also costs 1. So this is just kind of a mess of an ability, in my opinion. It is very slow and resource heavy. I don't like it. He has the ability on attack, says if you control another exhausted unit, you may exhaust a unit. So even when he's a unit, it still isn't good because him attacking is not enough. You need another unit to have attacked first or come into play first, and then you can attack with C3PO and exhaust a unit. So it's weird, right? These exhausting effects are supposed to help you maybe race or mitigate damage. I assume with a 4-flip leader, similar to Cal Kestis, the idea would be that it would help you race in situations because you can't play a mid-range or control deck with this kind of leader because you're not getting any value from your leader unit in those situations. It's why these low-cost leaders almost always just have to be face-slamming decks because the only advantage you get is that they're coming out super early and posing problems for your opponent by just deploying more units than them. They aren't going to be equalizers, right? Because this is a 1/6. One more resource nets you 4 6s and 3 7s. So the stat difference, the amount of power you get from flipping early is fully front-loaded on the fact that you are coming out early. But this guy doesn't have any good stats, so, and his abilities aren't really synergistic with an aggro deck. This doesn't look any good to me. I did mention Babu Frick, and yes, that is powerful. You could probably curve out a Babu Frick with C3PO and sometimes just like steal a game. But I'm not seeing much else to want to do here. It doesn't look any better to me than Cal Kestis, who is also not a good leader, by the way. So, you know, he's cool. Card looks cool. All right, let's get into the cards. And here we go with Vigilance first. We got Lobot. He's a 2-cost 0/4 Fringe, Sentinel, Grit. You know, it's cool. I don't think this is great. Honestly, I just wanted to kind of call it out here. The issue, of course, is the first attack into this, even if it doesn't kill it, is free. They can just push damage into this without taking any back. They can one-shot it without taking any damage back, right? I just, there's like, in Villain specifically, like Pike Sentinel is just so much better than this. And yeah, like you can, with Grit, if you have ways to kind of self-damage, that's great. You can even think, oh, it's good with Kira. Well, it's just still worse than Pike Sentinel in a Kira deck because Pike Sentinel doesn't require you to shield it to do something. So I don't want to write this off completely, and there are maybe some decks that could utilize this a little better, maybe even a Ray deck that can buff it, self-pinging decks potentially, and maybe we get a little more synergy here, but, you know, it's not terrible. I just currently think there's mostly better Sentinels to play. We got Populous Advisor. Now this one is going to be good. This is a 1-cost Heroism Vigilance unit, and he's a 1/4. New Republic trait, interesting, official. When an enemy unit deals combat damage to your base, this will gain Sentinel for the phase. That's pretty strong, right? Your opponent gets one shot at your base, but then this 1/4 becomes a Sentinel, and this guy costs 1, which means he can squeeze into any curve. And once again, we have to mention Ray. We have to mention Ray with a lot of cards, just because that turn, especially 1-drops that synergize well with Ray, are very, very powerful. And this is a 2/5 that you play on turn 1, and all of a sudden there's a 2/5 like pseudo Sentinel in play. You can get buffed further. Very powerful with Ray, but I don't think it's limited to just Ray. I think this card is just pretty decent because of how cheap it is. 4 health, potential Sentinel for 1. Do keep in mind that this needs to be in play when your opponent deals combat damage to your base. If they attack your base with something and then you play this still won't have Sentinel, to my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but is it a line of text that happens when your opponent deals combat damage to your base? So, I think this is just a good card and has a lot of synergy with Ray, maybe even with like Luke from set 1, where you can give it a shield on turn 1. But cool card. Next, we got Knowledge and Defense. This is a 3-card cost Vigilance event that says give a unit -2/-2 for this phase and draw a card. So we see a version of this card in like every set almost. We got Make an Opening, got Perilous Position. Last set we had Whirlwind of Power. Now we have Knowledge and Defense. This is somewhere between like Perilous Position and Make an Opening. I think it's probably worse than Perilous Position because it's not permanent, doesn't exhaust. Getting a card back is nice. A deck like a hard control deck might appreciate that draw card a little more because they typically are a little more hand starved, but you know, it's flexible. It's going to replace a lot of those options when rotation hits. It's okay. And then we have Emergency Powers, and this one's very interesting. This is a 1-cost Villainy Vigilance event, and it says choose a non-leader unit, and then you can pay any amount of resources, and for every resource you pay, you give an experience token to that unit. So if you could put this on leaders, it would be significantly better. So maybe that's a little bit of a safety valve here that you can't do that. So now if you're investing a lot of resources in this, you can get completely blown out by any removal or bounce effects. So you have to really find ways to utilize this without putting yourself at that risk. It carries very similar risk to a lot of upgrades, right? It's just most other upgrades to get their pure value are a little cheaper, right? You see 3-cost upgrades that give +3/+3 and some upside. This would cost 4 to give 3 power, and you don't get like the upside of like some lightsabers effect or whatever. Where this passes those things is when you're spending tons of resources on it, and you know, that's when you can get blown out even more by removal or bounce. So you need to find openings to put this into play. If you have ways to take a lot of actions potentially, and then your opponent isn't able to hold up a bunch of resources, and then you can spam a bunch of resources for this, get a huge attack, sort of like fireball your opponent in one turn, right? That's the main ceiling here, is that you can do absurd amount of damage with this card the turn you play it, more than most other cards, because you can put a ton of readied power into play with one card. It has really nice synergy with Axe Woves, where all those experience tokens are kind of doubled up with him, so that's nice. It, of course, can synergize well with Lurking TIE Phantom, similar to, like any of the pilots we've seen, that just, you go Lurking TIE, you put an item on it. Yeah, that can sometimes hard carry you, and this is very similar to doing that, and gives you a little more options. So, I think this is an interesting card to sort of have in your back pocket in some decks, if you can find ways to guarantee you get that attack off, right? You don't want to be spamming this. It's not very, when there's a bunch of open resources on your side, and it's also not something that is very good on the lower end of the curve. That's when other upgrades will mostly be better than this, unless, of course, you put this on Axe Woves, in which case, no matter where in the curve you're putting this on him, it's going to be a ton of power. So, I think it's a pretty interesting one. And then we have a few of the more filler cards. We got the Bartotin Ornithopter. It's a 3/4 for 4. You can disclose Vigilance if you do draw a card. It's fine. I mean, there's Red Squadron X-Wing in hero decks already. That's a 3-cost 3/4 that draws you a card if you put 2 damage on it. I think that card is just better than this, but this is like okay. It certainly looks like it could be decent in draft, especially if draft isn't super aggro. You got a 6-cost 6/6 Sentinel in Hero Vigilance. That card's not terrible. That's a pretty beefy Sentinel. Like, no, it's not very high rate for a 6-drop, but there could be situations where it does just enough. And we got a 5-cost Nala here. It's a 4/7. It says, on attack, you may disclose blue if you do heal up to 4 damage from other units. I don't get this card at all. This isn't any good at all. If this was a when played, it would be maybe decent. On attack, it can't even like deal its damage first and then heal itself because it's an on attack trigger. 5-cost do nothings. We know from precedent it doesn't work. They're not playable in high level constructed. Your cards that cost 5 or even 4 and higher really need to do something when you play them, and this doesn't. All right, next up, we've got Command, and not a lot in Command this week, but we did get a new Legendary. It's an upgrade, Figure of Unity. Command Heroism, it says attached to a unique unit. Gives that unit +2/+2, and it also says the unit gains, while this unit is ready, each other friendly unit gains Overwhelm, Raid 1, and Restore 1. So it's kind of a board buffer, and again, we have to see go wide strategies be supported before a card like this would be any good. The issue, of course, too, is because you have to play this card for 3, you can't add to the board as much because you're spending a bunch of resources on an upgrade, so that can sort of affect your ability to go wide enough. I think the clause here that limits the unit to only providing the buffs when it itself is ready is a bit much. I wish that line of text just didn't exist. I don't think this card needed to be nerfed in that way, but now you can put this on a unit. That might be the best unit for you to attack with first now because it's your largest unit. But if you want any of the other effects, you can't. That unit has to sit there until all the other things have attacked. But, this has a very high ceiling, of course, because giving every unit in play Raid 1 and Restore 1 and the Overwhelm is minor, but relevant, is a lot. Can certainly win tons of races. This isn't limited to ground either. It's just to unique. So if you do have like a unique spaceship, think maybe like a Bright Hope or something where it's just like a really high health unit that's going to be difficult to remove, then you can keep this static buff going. So it looks like an interesting build around, honestly, and maybe would work well with like double green where you get a bunch of go wide support and tokens and stuff like that, or just like with a lot of 1-drops or whatever it may be. Maybe it is just a space deck start card, even though you got a bunch of ground units in the picture. But who knows? Interesting build around for sure. And then we've got some generic stuff. We got the Daro Commando. He's a 3/4 Overwhelm for 3 Imperial Clone Trooper. Stats don't support it in Constructed. The GNK Power Droid. It's a 2-cost 1/3 that says on attack, the next unit you play this phase costs 1 less. Yeah, like if you get to attack with it, of course, it is cheating resources, but it itself is a very weak unit. It costing 2 means it's the only thing you can even put into play on turn 1. So even if you do get to cheat out a 4-drop, you're doing it at the expense of having to spend your whole first turn playing a 1/3. So it's not very good. Then we've got Convene the Senate. It's a 3-cost event that says search the top 8 cards of your deck for 2 official units, reveal them, draw them, and then create a spy token. 3-cost draw 2 is not good enough in this game. 3-cost draw 2, create a spy is still probably not good enough. And of course, this isn't draw 2, this is search for 2 officials. Now in a pure official deck, that maybe isn't difficult, but it's still limiting. I don't think the spy somehow takes this into high playability rate. And now we're up to aggression. So the first one we got here is Punishing One, and it is a 5-cost aggression card, space unit, underworld, vehicle transport, 3/5. It's raid 1 for each damaged enemy unit, and it has a when played and on attack that deals the damage to a unit. This one's decent. It's underworld, so This works pretty well with Cad Bane, especially like curving something like IG 2000 into punishing one. You can put like a lot of damage on a lot of your opponent's units, get extra value from all these incidental pings. All of a sudden, this might hit for 4 or 5, get an extra hit in on the attack effect. Now, always talk about is how much value do we need on a when played for a 5-cost unit, and this is just 1 damage, and that's why I like lean more Cad Bane, because then you're actually getting 2 damage from this coming into play, and all of a sudden that looks a little more enticing than just 1. Being in space gives it a little more flexibility. They tend to be units that are a little more difficult to remove. This one's decent. I don't know if it's going to be quite good enough, but it's at least worth considering. We also have Luthen's Hallcraft, and this is also a 5-cost aggression heroism space unit with the inverse stats of punishing one. It's a 5/3. And it says when defeated, you may choose an opponent and disclose aggression, and heroism. If you do, the opponent discards 2 cards from their hand. So it's like it pillages your opponent when it dies. I've seen a similar card to this in the Senatorial Corvette. That one, of course, it didn't rip 2 cards out of your opponent's hand, but it also didn't need the disclose effect. So in this case, you're kind of paying the disclose to get that extra card. I think the Corvette also had 1 more health, but I don't think that's highly relevant. What's also really nice about this is this actually plays around no glory, because your opponent who plays no glory is not going to be able to disclose red hero, so they're not going to get to rip cards out of your hand. Whereas with like the Corvette, if they no gloried it, you would get a card ripped out. So this looks to me mostly like a card you might side in against control decks. Potentially it makes its way into main decks if control is like highly represented. But overall, I would say, yeah, this is more of like an anti-control card, just like the Corvette was. The Corvette was pretty good at doing that. And I think this one probably does it a little better if you can support the disclose cost. We also have Crosshair here, and mostly putting this on the list so I can complain a little bit about it. This is a 2-cost 2/3 aggression unit that says on attack, you may deal 1 damage to another friendly unit if you do deal 2 damage to a defending player's base. Why is this not just a 2/4? We've kind of established that's the new baseline for units. This one is not good enough of an effect to warrant losing that health. It just isn't. This on attack doesn't even like curve into a turn well, because you need to play another unit first before you can attack with this to actually make this go off, because you can't even ping itself. You have to ping another unit. And then all you're getting, you don't even get to put the damage onto your opponent's units. You have to do it to base, and great. It's nice that this is a 2-cost unit that can theoretically attack for 4 onto your opponent's base, but just too easy to interrupt because it doesn't like you can't attack with this as your first action. You have to like play your 3-drop first. This just needed why is this just not a 2/4? I mean, maybe all these traits, Imperial Clone Trooper, like warrant this, but to me it just seems like this isn't one of these cards that's just not going to see much play because the stats don't support it. And we're seeing a 2-cost 2/4 that has restore 1 and draws a card when it dies. And now we're seeing a 2/3 with like a conditional ability, and it just isn't lining up for me. All right, Mirage Sintel is a 5-cost 3/7 aggression villainy card. It's a Separatist official. Separatist, interesting here because this is a 5-cost. It actually means you can play this on turn 2 in the Dooku deck if you wanted to. It says while a friendly unit is attacking a damaged unit, the attacker gains overwhelm. You know, mostly flavor text, but interesting. But a very decent when played effect. Deal 3 damage to an undamaged unit. So we always talk about we need power from the when played on these 5 costs, and you know this mostly gives you that 3 power, 3 damage from your 5-cost 3/7 just on play is pretty strong. You know, there is that extra conditional element to it. Can't do it to a damaged unit. 3 might not be enough to kill units these days, right? It can kill Crosshair, but it can't kill most other 2-drops. So it might be a situation where you do the 3 and then you have to kill it with something else. And that's where like the rest of her text might be useful, where you can then attack into it and gain some overwhelm. But it's also a pretty sticky unit. It's a 3/7. This one looks decent to me. I could certainly see this getting played in some situations. Other decks that do chip damage might benefit because then they won't need to like spend more cards. They deal 3 with this, and then they can like ping with something. Talzin, for instance, can finish things off with the debuffs, whatever it may be. Those kinds of leaders might benefit more from this kind of effect. So, it's a decent card. And then we've got Let's Call It War. This is a 3-cost event. Deal 3 to a unit. Then if you have initiative, you may deal 2 damage to another unit in the same arena. So maybe this is the open fire replacement once rotation happens, but it's not as good as open fire. Again, 3 damage doesn't seem to be a good breakpoint anymore with how all these units on turn 1, or most of the ones that are good, are either 4 health or shielded or something. So it's nice that this can get extra value. This can theoretically do 5 damage for 3. It is locked to dealing damage to the same arena. This would be a pretty good anti-space card. This might even be better, a little better in that department than something like Grenade Strike. Not even just against space, against any spamming decks, because on turn 2, if you were going to do Grenade Strike, that was often your whole turn anyway. Now you can just do it for 3 resources and even kill like a larger unit. So this one's decent. This is certainly a card that could see competitive play, context willing. And then we have some filler cards. We got a 1-drop 2/2 Hidden Rebel Official in Heroism Aggression. It's not a terrible 1-drop. You got a 2/1 Saboteur and 1-cost Aggression Rebel Twi'lek. That one's probably not good enough. We have the AAT Incinerator. It's a 5-cost 3/6 that says when played, deal 1 damage to each of up to 4 other ground units. And if you deal no damage to a friendly unit, you also deal 2 damage to your base, and it can't deal damage to itself. Now, this one doesn't look great to me, although, again, context dependent, being able to just ping 4 units is certainly something you would consider. Good thing Django's banned, though. And, adding this to the card pool in Eternal, with Django still being allowed there, is just another tool for that deck to completely exhaust an opponent's board. And this would be good in a Django deck. It can even get triple dark rated. So it's like another IG 2000 that might be even better than IG 2000 because it's a sturdier unit. So, yeah. And then we've got the Imperial Occupier, 2-cost Villainy Aggression. He's a 2/2 Imperial Trooper. When defeated, create a spy token. 2/2 for 2 is not great. I get the when defeated, it's nice. Where this does have some decent synergy is actually with Thrawn, the one that doubles when defeated effects, because now you're getting 2 spies out of that. That's actually pretty powerful. I think most other decks would probably not benefit from including a card like this, but Thrawn certainly could. All right, Cunning, and not a ton of Cunning this week, but we've got A-Wing without any green or blue or other colors. It's a 1-cost 1/2 with Raid 1, and it's a vehicle fighter. I don't have a lot to say here. This is playable because a lot of decks want to play 2 1-drops on turn 1 in space, and this is certainly better than some other ones. Like Vader would play this, Han 4 would play this. This is a fighter, so, I know Luke Pilot isn't usually paired with yellow, but, it has another good fighter to play on turn 1 now. And that's certainly an upgrade for that kind of strategy if you want to try it. So yeah, it's a solid 1-drop. That's what I got for you. And then we have some more filler cards. We got Vel Sartha. It's a 4/6 for 5. It's a Rebel, Raid 2. Each exhausted enemy unit gets -2, -0 while defending. This is mostly a do nothing for 5. The effect isn't terrible, and you might get some value from it the turn you play it. If your opponent like attacks with some stuff and then you play your Vel, all those units now are like small on the crackback. So I don't want to say this has like no hope at all. There might be some situations where that effect, you can really utilize it to get some value trades the turn you play it. But that's really going to be the key there. We got the Unruly Astromech. It's a 3/2 3 for 3. It's a droid. Hidden when defeated, exhaust an enemy unit. The stats are too poor for a 3-drop. And then we've got another 3-drop. It's a Rebel Propagandist Cunning Heroism unit. It's a 2/4 Rebel official. When played and when defeated, give another friendly unit +1/+0 and Saboteur for this phase. Issues here. First, the stats aren't good. Now, we've seen other 3-drops that are like kind of buff effects. So like Fleet Lieutenant, Maz Kanata. The thing is, both of those have 3 power, first of all, which is a pretty significant upgrade to 2. And they both also action cheat their effect. This one, it doesn't buff as much and doesn't action cheat. And you're giving up more stats to play it. All for the added bonus of this having the same effect when it's defeated. But I don't think this is quite good enough, just from precedent on what kind of 3-cost buff cards have been playable. All right, now the Villain Heroism Neutral. Not a ton great stuff here. I chose to highlight one of them, the FN Trooper Core. It's a 4/5 with plot that says when played, give an experience token to another friendly unit. Now, I don't think this is good enough. Now, plot is a pretty powerful effect, and like, let's not dismiss the fact that you can flip your leader, you pay 5, you throw an experience token on that leader. That's pretty nice, but you also did just spend 5 resources on this card. You gave up your whole turn to do that. And I do think we're going to need our plot cards to be a little higher value than this to be good enough to include, especially because the card is basically bad whenever you're not plotting it, right? And that's going to be the key here is plot happens one time a game unless you're playing something like Trench. So we need these cards hopefully to not be completely useless when we're not plotting them. I will call out Captain Phasma with this. This is a first order unit, so if you flip Captain Phasma, you can immediately action cheat this. You plot it, you put that experience on Phasma, and this also turns on her on attack effect, which is nice. Is it good enough to make Captain Phasma good? No, probably not, but it's definitely better there than it is with most other leaders. And you know, we've seen a few other ways to buff your leader with plot. We've seen a few upgrades that do it. So this is another one of those tools. This one just looks a little overcosted and underpowered overall. Then we got a few others here. We have the High Command Canceller. It's a 1/4 Rebel Official in Heroism that says while you control another official unit, this unit gains Raid 2. So reminds me a little about the Partisan Insurgents. They were 1/4s that got Raid 2 when when you had another red unit, right? The card that's not terrible text, honestly. I just really haven't seen official be a particularly supported archetype for heroes yet. It looks like villains are the ones that are getting more benefit there, but you know, you could look at this card if official go wide is a heroism build around. We have a 1-cost 2/2 first order official in Villainy, the Supreme Council aid. Well, okay. And then we have Ando Commission. It's a 4-cost neutral 4/3 Sentinel. It's Separatist. Also not very good. All right, that's what I got for this batch of spoilers. Let me know what you think of these cards. I'm excited to keep getting some more previews. Really looking forward to a new set injecting some more life into the meta, hopefully at least. And yeah, I'll keep covering them as they come. Until next time, take care.